Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Okay, I gotta hand it to you. You really weren't kidding around with this one, were you? Hitler and Castro.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a deep dive. Two dictators, two totally different paths to power. But we're not here to just, list off facts. This is about how they use ideology. Yeah, the actions were horrific, but the ideas behind them, that's the truly chilling part.
It's like you open a history book, you see the names, the battles, but we're trying to crack the code here, right?
Yeah.
How did these guys take abstract ideas and weaponize them, turn them into something terrifyingly real?
Exactly. Like with Hitler, I mean, we all know the ending, World War II, the Holocaust. But how did he even get there? Our sources this time are pretty dense, by the way, almost like a college lecture note, so get ready to think. First up, we got to unpack this whole Volksgemeinschaft thing.
Which basically means people's community. Almost sounds nice, right?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about some hippie commune here. This was about a pure German identity, a master race with Hitler at the center.
And what's scary is how appealing that was to a lot of Germans at the time. Think about it. It's post-World War I, their economy's in ruins, they've lost their national pride, and along comes Hitler, promising to make Germany great again. But there's a catch, right? They have to buy into this twisted vision of unity.
Yeah, and that's a huge takeaway right there. Desperate times. They can make dangerous ideologies really seductive, like a virus almost, preying on a weakened immune system.
And speaking of viruses, this whole Führerprinzip thing, it's like injecting the idea of Hitler as this indispensable leader straight into the veins of German society.
Right. It's not enough to just be a dictator. You
Yeah.
got to create this aura of necessity around your rule.
Yeah.
It's like those, what do you call them? Cults of personality.
Oh, yeah.
Like North Korea. You've got generations who've been taught to worship the Kim dynasty, right?
Yeah.
They believe these guys are divinely appointed. That kind of ingrained belief system, it's almost impossible to break.
So from pure community to indispensable leader, Hitler's laying the groundwork for something truly horrific. But then he goes from manipulating minds to enacting actual policy with the Nuremberg Laws in 1935. And it's not just a list of rules, it's like a playbook for how quickly a society can unravel.
Seriously, imagine. You're a Jewish shopkeeper, life seems normal, and then bam, overnight you're stripped of your citizenship, your livelihood, everything. Your neighbor, who you've known for years, he's suddenly encouraged to report you just for existing. That's how fast hate, fueled by ideology, can become the law.
And that's why understanding this progression from idea to action, it's so crucial. It shows how seemingly small compromises can snowball into unimaginable horrors. Like that old saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of how this idea of Lebensraum, living space, it goes from this theory about German expansion to literally justifying invading other countries, displacing and murdering millions.
It's like this recipe for disaster, right? You've got economic hardship, people craving a sense of identity, and then this charismatic leader pops up with a terrifying but seductive vision. It's almost, I don't know, it's a lot to process. Which is why, honestly, shifting gears to Fidel Castro feels almost like a breath of fresh air. Almost.
Because here's the thing, Castro didn't come to power with this, overtly racist genocidal ideology. Early Castro, he was all about social justice. In fact, one of our sources even quotes his famous "History will absolve me" speech.
Right, where he says, when a government violates the rights of the people, insurrection is the most sacred of rights. I mean, taken out of context, that almost sounds, I don't know, kind of noble.
Exactly. He knew how to frame his message. He's the liberator, freeing the Cuban people from this corrupt dictator, Batista. And it wasn't all a lie. His early reforms, like redistributing land, those literacy programs, they really spoke to people who were desperate for change.
So yeah, you can totally see why people were drawn to him, at least at first. But then there's this whole Marxist turn. It's not like he just woke up one morning and decided to be a communist dictator.
Right. Our source points to the influence of guys like Che Guevara, and then the external pressures, like the Bay of Pigs invasion. It kind of pushed Castro further down this radical path. Imagine the Cold War.
Yeah.
The U.S. is breathing down your neck trying to take you down. It's got to push you to extremes.
And that's where things take a dark turn, right? We can't talk about Castro without mentioning the UMP camps, these forced labor camps where they sent anyone they considered a threat to the revolution to be re-educated.
And by threat, we're talking about a pretty broad spectrum. Religious minorities, LGBTQ individuals, artists, intellectuals, anyone who didn't quite fit into Castro's communist utopia.
It's like the ultimate betrayal, right? You start with these grand ideas of equality, of liberation, and then you end up imprisoning your own people for just thinking differently.
It shows how power, even when it starts with good intentions, can be intoxicating and ultimately corrupting. But here's what's interesting. Even with their vastly different ideologies, both Hitler and Castro, they end up using similar tools to control their people.
Okay, see, that's a great segue, because I was thinking we were dealing with apples and oranges here, but now you're saying it's more like, what, a fruit salad?
Yeah, more like a fruit salad, but with some unexpected and honestly unsettling similarities. Take their views on women, for example.
Okay, this is where I need you to connect the dots for me. Because on the surface, we've got Hitler with this whole Kinderküchenkämpfe thing.
Right.
Children, kitchen, church, basically saying a woman's place is in the home, very traditional.
And it wasn't just tradition. I mean, it was strategic. A big, rapidly growing population that was essential to Hitler's whole vision. Women were valuable, but only as, like, vessels for the state.
Right. Right. Whereas Castro, at least on paper, he's all about women's liberation. Literacy campaigns, job opportunities for women. They even had that, what was it called? The Federation of Cuban Women.
Right.
It almost feels like he's on the right side of history here, at least compared to Hitler, you know?
Right. But that's the danger of just looking at the surface. Yeah, more women were working in Castro's Cuba, but that liberation, it came with a catch. It was about serving the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Doing your patriotic duty.
So less about actual freedom of choice and more about, like, who gets to decide what your life looks like.
Exactly. Whether it's the Nazi ideal of, like, motherhood for the Reich or the Cuban woman working for the communist cause, it all comes down to control.
Yeah.
Both regimes, they knew that if you control the lives of women, you control the future.
And that control, that manipulation, it wasn't limited to just gender, right? I mean, we talked about propaganda, but these guys were masters at controlling the narrative.
Oh, absolutely. It's about creating a world where your ideology, it's not just a belief system, it's reality. Think about those massive rallies Hitler used to have, the spectacle, the fervor, this, like, manufactured image of unity.
Or those legendary Castro speeches, right? I read that he once spoke for something like over 7 hours straight.
Exactly. It's about captivating the masses, getting them emotionally invested, and drowning out any opposing voices. And if you did happen to speak out against the regime, well, both regimes, they had ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. And in Cuba, you had the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. It's kind of chilling when you think about it. Your own neighbors turning on you, fear as a motivator.
And that's the whole point, right? Fear is a powerful tool for any regime that wants to stay in power. You combine that with a carefully crafted narrative, a system that rewards towing the line and punishes anyone who steps out of line. Well, you've got a recipe for oppression.
Man, talk about a heavy way to wrap things up, huh? It's easy to look at Hitler and Castro and think, well, they were just anomalies. But what we've really uncovered here is how dangerous ideology can be, especially in the wrong hands. And that's something we got to be wary of, even today.
No doubt. The legacies of these regimes, the tactics they use, the dangers of unchecked ideology, they're all still relevant today. I think the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive is simple. Never underestimate the power of an idea, good or bad.
And on that chilling thought, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Remember, folks, history, it's not just dates in a textbook, it's a warning. It's full of lessons we can't afford to ignore. Until next time, keep asking those questions and stay curious.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.